Boston police officer John O'Keefe with her car after a night of drinking and leaving him in the snow to die. The defense is saying, as they said in their opening statement, that Karen Reed was framed and this is all a cover-up. We're at the morning break, and Mix Villar, the lab analyst who does the physical match, which seems to be a lab expertise in puzzling, which fascinates me, and I think it's fantastic. In addition to that witness also doing firearms and explosives work, which is not at issue in this case, but the physical match analysis of the taillight from Karen Reed's Lexus LX was why this witness was there to testify. But what was most interesting, I think, about this testimony is the spacing with which different pieces of taillight were recovered from 34 Fairview. Some on the 29th, some on February 8th, some on February 11th, some on February 14th, and none of it was submitted to the lab until March 14th, 2022. And the physical match expert was not brought onto the case until February of 2023. The larger pieces of taillight were matched together by this witness and placed back within the taillight casing, but there was pieces of clear plastic missing from what seemed to be the upper left, like the upper inside to the vehicle that would be closer to the rear tailgate, and then a small little piece of red that was missing, more like a crack or a small hole from that upper left area of the taillight. Those missing pieces, to me, seem consistent with the testimony of both Jen McCabe and Carrie Roberts. And this is where the defense needs to be careful with how they treat Jen McCabe as a witness. Did she lie about things? Did she not? What did she lie about? Because Jen McCabe and Carrie Roberts' testimony about the state of Karen Reed's taillight seems to be consistent with the pieces that the lab did not have. And isn't it interesting that those are the only pieces that the lab didn't have? That was the point of the cross-examination. And on redirect, Lally was asking again about what pieces of taillight came from the victim's clothes. But it has become clear that the victim's clothes, we don't know when they were recovered from the hospital and by who, but the victim's clothes and the taillight pieces seem to be in the custody of Trooper Proctor and were not delivered to the lab until March 14th of 2022. How those things were kept, I don't know, but it seems that the state is in a position where if they don't call Trooper Proctor, they have huge chain of custody issues. And if they do call Trooper Proctor, well, they may also have huge chain of custody issues with all of this. But I wonder if the jury's takeaway after going through, evidence item 7-5, 7-6, all the way through to 7-18, if their takeaway was what the lab didn't have. Well, after the morning break, as we finished up with the scientific evidence, what we learned from cross-examination from one of the lab supervisors in the trace unit is that the glass found near victim John O'Keefe's body did not match the glass found on defendant Karen Reed's bumper. Isn't that interesting? The glass from the bumper, one piece of the bumper glass matched a piece of glass found in the street outside of 34 Fairview, not the day of the crime. Do we know what day that piece of glass was recovered? No, because we didn't see the front of the evidence sign-in sheet while that testimony was happening. But it was very interesting to learn that the glass on the bumper and the drinking glass near the victim are not the same glass on a chemical level. It's going to be real interesting to hear what, if any, explanation there is about that. But again, more questions than answers at the end of the lab witnesses. And then the prosecution called Trooper Buchanan. Trooper Buchanan also seems to believe that he is a medical professional. And it is my opinion that this trooper at times is given lengthier answers than called for by the prosecution, seemingly to answer the internet. He's also made pointed looks, I believe, at both the defense and the media gallery. He has smirked at the defense table when objections have been made, but the trooper was asked about some medical testimony about his opinion of the condition of the victim when he saw the victim at the hospital. I don't know why the prosecution is trying to elicit that information from this witness if the victim has a head injury, which it seems pretty clear that he did. We would know that from the coroner or medical examiner that is yet to be called. At some point, I'd really like to understand why that individual has not been called yet. But I imagine that the answer is, why are we this far along in this case, 20 days and over 50 witnesses into trial, and we haven't heard from a coroner? Why? Why? I am trying to patiently wait for the state to prove their own case, but we are so deep in the weeds with this. And it's clear that the defense is going to fight to make sure that Trooper Buchanan, who is partners with Trooper Proctor, is not able to answer about the things that Trooper Proctor did, seeming to me to not only force the state's hand to call Trooper Proctor, but to continue to point out what Buchanan did and what Proctor did. Buchanan, interestingly, has been Proctor's supervisor since Proctor started working with state police and with the division that is under the Norfolk DA's office. Yes, this division of investigators is under the Norfolk DA's office. So I am very interested to see what goes on from here. The court shut down most of the testimony from this trooper about his observations of the victim's injuries when it came to his belief about the source of those injuries. But we can see that this witness is trying to over answer and over explain. And from the myriad of objections, which I am not criticizing because I think it's inappropriate for this officer to give that type of medical testimony, especially before we have a coroner. If we had a coroner's testimony already that was consistent, it might not be as odd. But without a coroner, without any testimony and evidence yet, I think it is a bit too much. But we already see that there is no love lost between this trooper and Alan Jackson. He's already making some pointed looks towards Alan Jackson as Alan is objecting. So I believe that this cross-examination, A, will probably not be done today, and B, will be incredibly feisty. At the end of the afternoon of day 20 of the Commonwealth versus Karen Reed, Trooper B is still on the stand, and we are getting into testimony regarding the bars at CF McCarthy's in the Waterfall, the receipts from the bar tab from both bars, video where the trooper is pointing out where Karen Reed is drinking or grabbing a shot and pouring it into a tall glass. And he was starting to read in the receipt, and then it was objected to, and the rest of the receipt didn't come in. For me, it is still unclear if from CF McCarthy's there was one tab that was split and then paid for by both Karen Reed and John O'Keefe, or if there was only one tab. So it's unclear to me at this point, because at one point the witness said receipts, and then it seemed that maybe the tab was paid all by John O'Keefe. The prosecution's questioning on that had not been clear. It seems that there were 7 or 8 drinks at CF McCarthy's, in that the defendant got a tall glass drink that seems to be vodka soda based on the defendant's statements to this trooper that she had been drinking vodka sodas that night. And then she would get a shot from the bartender and pour it into the tall glass. And that's how we get to, I believe we were at 3 full like vodka sodas and then 3 or 4 shots that got poured into those. But it is unclear what the drink count was, whether it was 7 or 8 when leaving CF McCarthy's, because the numbering got weird in there somewhere. But it was more than a few. But I really want to see the receipt, because if those drinks were vodka sodas, it makes sense that they were $10. If they were just soda, it doesn't make sense that they were $10. But could she have ordered a glass of soda and lime and then poured shots into them? Sure. We just don't quite know. But the testimony we have regarding the defendant's drinking so far is this. A, Carrie Roberts said the defendant told her she had been intoxicated and she didn't remember leaving the waterfall. Then Jen McCabe said, no, I saw you in the car at 34 Fairview. We also have the defendant saying to Trooper B that she had been drinking vodka sodas the night before. We also have everyone else that was at the bar saying she didn't seem that intoxicated, that People had been drinking, but she didn't seem super inebriated at any point. When she's walking out of CF McCarthy's and when she's walking around the waterfall, she does not seem to be visibly stumbling or any other external signs of inebriation. But the jury's going to get to decide that. And the jury has now the videos from the bars in their entirety and the receipts from the bars, and they can decide. We also know there's evidence about the defendant's BAC. The defendant's BAC, when her blood was drawn at the hospital pursuant to the Section 12, that the range at 9 a.m. was estimated to be between 0.07 and 0.08 on the low and high, with a median of like 0.08, 1, 2, or 3. My memory is failing me, but it was right in that low 0.08 range was the median at 9 a.m. when it was converted. We also heard about the retrograde extrapolation, which places her last drink at 12:45, which seems a bit later, but places her last drink at 12:45 and then extrapolates at her BAC with the BAC at 9 a.m. If she had not drank between 12:45 and the blood draw, that the retrograde extrapolation on that would put her in the high 0.1s to the high 0.2s. And that range is where they think she would have been after 12:45 at night. So there is testimony about that. Is there any testimony about her hitting John O'Keefe with her car yet? No. But there was lots of testimony from this trooper and video shown from Ring doorbells at the defendant's parents' home, Ring doorbells from the victim's home, video from the Sally Port showing the state of the defendant's car and the state of her taillight. In some of those videos, to me, the taillight looks clearly broken. In some of those videos, to me, it's definitely not as clear. So, is anything clear yet? Well, drinks were had. So, that we're there on drinks were had at the bars by everybody. And it was snowing, but a lot of it is challenging. But there are parts where you look at the video and it looks like the taillight is gone. But is it as gone as it seems in the Sally Port videos or not? And the defense made an excellent point earlier in the day about the pieces of taillight that are still missing are much smaller. So with all of that, there's more to go in this case. And I imagine the judge is starting to lean into the prosecutor at these sidebars about speeding it up. Remember, doubt always defaults to the defendant. The defendant is innocent till proven guilty. It is the prosecution's job to move that case from innocent till proven guilty to beyond a reasonable doubt with the evidence that they put in. When that evidence is unclear, I find that it's harder for juries to get there. And as evidence is coming in now at the end of the case, has too much damage been done? And will we see Trooper Proctor testify? Or is Trooper B kind of the end of their police witnesses? When are we ever going to see a coroner? When are we going to see cell phone data from the victim's phone and the defendant's phone? And when are we going to see any data from the defendant's car? I don't know. But I'm optimistic that it will be soon because we are getting very far afield, 20 days and 55 witnesses in. We have not seen a coroner yet. And I am now very much wondering why. For deep dives into the stories that I covered here, you can find them on my YouTube channel at The Emily D. Baker.